We're going to talk again about binary, so it's nice to have that common thread going through. A bit about binary numbers, e-textiles, which is my area of specialism, and then a recent obsession of mine, which is a heritage textile craft called passementerie. This is a very long title now that I read it out myself, but I'm not very good at being concise. And a little bit about me, just start. I struggle to choose a noun to describe myself, somewhere between a researcher, maker, and educator. I mostly work with e-textiles, so if that's a new word for you, it's where you try and put electronics into fabric, into clothing and other things, which can be fun, but also horribly challenging as well. And I also work with flexible electronics, which is, if you imagine a normal rigid circuit board, but it's on a flexible plastic, that's what it's like. You may have seen one if you've ever built or broken a computer or smartphone. And I'm a lecturer at Nottingham Trent University, so Danica is my colleague, but we hadn't met before because I'm in engineering, which is banished to the science campus. I guess I'm trying to be a slightly subversive person with engineering, trying to do creative stuff, so interested in if anyone else has had that experience, you might give me some advice on that. These are some projects I've worked on in the past. I've put them on the slide, but I realize if I talk about all of them, we'll be here all day, so please ask me later. But use of different patterns in textile interfaces on the skin. Top right is a modular synthesizer. Bottom left is a flexible LED circuit with a pattern just for aesthetic purposes. And then the bottom right was part of my PhD research. My PhD is thankfully in the past. This was a stretchable LED strip, so it's basically a long strip of flexible circuitry, but then if you wrap that into a helix, it becomes stretchable. And I've put this here because it's kind of the starting point of this whole project that I'm talking about, because while doing my literature review from my PhD, I read about metallic threads which have been used in textiles going back centuries, which I'm sure many of you in the audience are aware of. And there are metal threads with this same structure. So on the left we have a silk organza, which is made of these silk threads with a metal foil wrapped around them, very small. And this was used in one of the early papers on e-textiles to make a circuit, actually. It's kind of gone out of fashion in e-textiles, so I'm trying to bring back the use of these threads. And then the middle and right images are microscope images of threads from Renaissance tapestries. So historically, when you saw these gold, silver, copper threads, they were used for embellishment or to communicate the richness and the wealth of the person wearing them. But they don't just have to be for rich people. So this got me interested in getting some of these threads for myself and using them. And I bought a sample pack of threads from a company near Liverpool who still sell them. They're a bit more expensive than regular threads, but they're very cool, so we will allow them that. So you can see in the middle here, this is called a Rococo thread. It's got this wavy, cool character. And you can see this kind of helical structure again. It's got just actually really thin copper foil, cut very thin, narrow, that's the word, and then wrapped around some, I think it's polyester threads in the middle to maintain that shape. And then on the right, this is actually a triple helix, so 3 helical threads wrapped around each other. So I was kind of testing these at home to see, I say at home because it was a side project that I wasn't supposed to be working on during my day job, so I was doing it in my own time. Some of these were conductive and some weren't, because some are made of actual metal and some are cheaper, so they're just plastic that's made to look like metal. But there was this interesting middle case where this thread appeared not to be conductive, but then I wanted to pull apart the foil that was around it and see what was it made of, and it turned out that it was actually metal foil with plastic layers on top that are kind of a yellowy color that make it appear gold. So there's 2 purposes for that. One is you can use a cheap metal like aluminium and make it look fancy. And the other practical application is that by coating it with plastic, you can prevent it from tarnishing, so it's going to last a bit longer. Interestingly, if you Google, if you search, I'm using a proprietary term, goldwork threads, you come across military forums where people with these goldwork threads on military insignia are discussing how to clean them without destroying them after they become tarnished, so that's a weird rabbit hole I went down. So then I became interested in the question of are there other materials that are kind of accidentally conductive? Never finished that train of thought because I got distracted into these trims, which can also be metallic. So these are called gimp braid, possibly not the meaning of that word that you're thinking of, but these patterns I started to see everywhere, and I thought they were so interesting. And it turns out that there is an overlap between goldwork embroidery and these patterns, but I wanted to know, like, what is this called, this kind of thing? And after more internet rabbit hole searching, I came across this term, passementerie. Apologies to any native French speakers, because I am going to butcher that every time I say it. But roughly, this is an umbrella term that covers tassels, these looping braids, which I'm most interested in, fancy-looking ropes, beading, overlaps a little bit with lace. They're the kind of thing you see in a National Trust house if you live in the UK and have been in a National Trust house. Yeah, they can mean a lot of things, but what I'm interested in mostly is these braids, because the patterns are interesting, and we're interested in patterns. I also highly recommend going on Wikimedia Commons and looking at their collection of archival textile images, because there's some wonderful, beautiful images of passementerie. So we've got two braids here, and then fringe as well at the bottom. These are all from the Fashion Museum in Antwerp. But you can see these really interesting repeating patterns. And also it's kind of like a polyphonic rhythm. You've got multiple things going on at the same time. So that to me is very appealing. These I also think are just so beautiful. On the top we have an American example from the early 20th century where we have actually multiple rows going on. And this to me is where it starts to look a little bit like a circus. That might be my electronics indoctrination. We start to see parallels between circuitry and passementerie. And then on the bottom we've got a braid with some fringe as well from 19th century France. You can also go way more complex, so these kind of knotting structures, and then on the right-hand side, you can see there's a little passementerie braid on this chair, which is, once you kind of start to notice these things, you start to see them everywhere. They weren't something that interested me for a long time, because I thought their trimmings are kind of like superfluous, or they're in dusty houses, but when I became obsessed with the patterns, I started to like them more. And this is a video of a French company making passementerie with still sort of semi-manually operated looms. I think this shot is so wonderful, just showing how they are constructed. And then we've got a punch card. So it's a jacquard loom, I guess, which is something I'm sure we're going to hear about from other people. The jacquard looms have a lot of, they inspired the first computer. So that's enough of that. And then some electronics things that this reminds me of. On the left-hand side, we've got a wire wrap board. So these are a precursor to a modern PCB. But you kind of have similar geometry of the wires moving around. And then on the right-hand side, we have a modular synthesizer. Obviously a little more chaotic than passementerie, but you still have these kind of loose wires moving around in interesting patterns. So then all the examples we've looked at so far are kind of historical heritage stuff. This is Elizabeth Ashdown. She's a modern passementerie artist, and she makes these beautiful, colorful versions. I really love her work, and again, she makes these like interlocking things, which look like circuits to me. There's a bit of foreshadowing here. And she is one of very few practitioners left in the UK. The Heritage Crafts Association classifies passementerie as it's either endangered or critically endangered craft, one of those. So there are only a few hand practitioners and then a few companies making it. So the people still doing it are trying to do workshops to pass on the knowledge so it doesn't die out. And I went to one of her workshops because I wanted to learn how to do this. And you can buy books, obviously, but there's something about the experience of having someone show you the kind of intangible knowledge that you can't get from just reading a book. And then I kind of analyzed the patterns. So on the left-hand side, we have what's called a picot scallop braid. I should say first, these are woven. So in weaving, we have warp threads, which go straight top to bottom. I'm hitting my glasses off my face. And then we have weft threads, which weave in and out to make the weave. And in passmontery, you've a main body weft, like a normal weft that's just going in and out. But every couple of rows, depending on your design, you have these decorative wefts, which are chunkier. You can have one, you can have multiple, and they are not pulled tight against the warp. They're left a bit loose, so you get this nice loop structure. So a scallop means a wide loop, and a picot means a small loop. There aren't like absolute standards for how wide they can be. It's all relative within the design of the braid. But this one in the middle, it's got this repeating like 1, 2, 1, 2 pattern with the additional condition that the color changes of the decorative weft every time you weave the scallop. And then on the right-hand side, we've got 2 decorative wefts. So we're weaving the first one, then the second one, then the second one again, then the first one again, and then that's a module which we repeat. So it's like a while loop in programming, kind of, where the functions, the instructions in the loop are, do 1, 2, 2, 1, and then we just repeat that module until we reach the end of the weave. Not super surprising to see, crossovers with coding and weaving, because weaving and coding are basically the same thing, but it's always satisfying to see it in some things you haven't looked at before. So I wrote this, which one is it? P5.js sketch to kind of simulate how you weave it. This is just kind of a starting point, because I'd like to develop this more to have multiple wefts or different colors, because there aren't really design tools specifically for passmontery where you can visualize the loops. So I thought it'd be fun to do it this way. And then after that, I started thinking, these also kind of look like binary numbers to me, which may sound a bit weird, but maybe it'll make sense. So we're a mixed audience. I'm not going to assume everyone knows or remembers what a binary number is. So as a quick refresher, humans normally count in tens. That's the decimal system. We have 10 fingers. So that kind of makes sense for us. And we use the numbers 0 all the way through to 9. So in binary, by contrast, we count in twos. So we only use 0 and 1. We have no other characters to represent the number that we're counting. Why would we do this? Well, we saw an example just before now about really old use of that in various heritage practices. But it's also used a lot in computing, because the fundamental part of our computers is a transistor, which is a switch that's controlled by electricity, and it could be, well, they can't all, most of them can be on or they can be off. So that's like the on state is like a 1 and the off state is like a 0. So it makes sense to use a binary number system with that. And if you combine the transistors in many complex different ways, we can have lots of complex calculations and have computers and devices that do allow us to watch videos of cats on the internet and other things. So then if we have a number like this in decimal, we're like, okay, well the number to the far right is the 1, and then we've got the tens, the hundreds, and the thousands. So it's 1,101. But in binary instead, the numbers represent powers of 2. So 2 to the power of 0 is 1. Then we've got 2s, 4s, and 8s. So to figure out what that number means in decimal, you just add all of those together, and it's 13. And if this has gone over your head, don't worry, there won't be a test later. It's just for your information. So I made this simulator of how we would represent binary numbers in passmontery. So actually, let's go back to that first. So basically, we've got the purple threads. They kind of symbolize the digits of the number. And then if we weave the green weft through, that represents a 1. And if we don't weave it through, that represents a 0. I'm skipping ahead. So in this example on the left, you can kind of ignore the 0th row for now. It'll make sense later maybe. But we've got 1, 0. Actually, no, you read from right to left. Don't listen to me. We've got an 8, 1, 1, 0, 1, which was the number we saw on the previous screen, which is 13. And then here we've got 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, which is 41. And again, you can play around with this if you want. No, not that one. No, it was that one. So this simulator allows you to choose how many digits do you want. So let's say 4. And what number we want, so let's say 7, and then that will generate that for you. And you can change the number and see how it looks. Find one that you like. I made this partly just because I think it was cool, and also because I think something like binary is quite abstract to a lot of people. I've worked a lot with teaching electronics to kids, and I think when you translate something into a different form, it can help it make sense specifically, particularly if it's something you can touch, because we all like to touch stuff. So I also wanted to make this interactive to kind of visualize it better. So because e-textiles is my specialty, I wove some e-textile samples, which I did bring with me. I think they're in my bag. So on a frame loom, I wove some double knit yarn and some conductive threads alongside the yarns, kind of conductive warp. And then in the weft, I used a ribbon. And then in certain places, the conductive thread is picked up to the top, so it's able to touch this conductive weft that's woven through. I do have a diagram on the next page that hopefully explains it better. And then at the end, I crimped on these connectors, which allowed me to connect it to an Arduino. If you don't know what an Arduino is, it's a kind of like a little computer that allows you to work with electronics. And then use some beads for insulation, because that's a classic e-textile trick. So this is the overall concept. So this is my sample. Going from left to right, I've got 16s, 8s, 4s, 2s, and 1s. So like in the previous thing, the kind of purple rows denote the digits of the binary number. But then we need to find some way to connect the decorative warp, this goldwork thread, to a conductive thread, and then get all that information out separately. So what I did was for each row, there's only one row where the conductive thread sits on the top. So for example, in the row corresponding to 1s, I've zoomed in here, and you can see only in this, I've mixed up the word rows and columns, so I've just said rows are vertical and columns are horizontal, but we'll stick with that even though it's unconventional. Or have I? No, columns should be vertical and rows should be horizontal. So in this row, we can see the conductive thread. So if we weave the decorative weft through there on top, it will touch this thread, but the others are all on the bottom, so they won't touch. So then what happens is this green row is the ground row. So the Arduino is connected to each row and also this ground row. So with this sample, we've got a 1 in 16 and we've got zeros everywhere else. So what happens is with the Arduino, we're checking, are any of these rows connected to ground? And the only one that is connected is 16. So that's going to turn into a 1, and everything else is going to be a 0. That's roughly how it works. I've no idea if that made sense, but here we are. And this is, the same image. Always nice to see the back of textile work. So on the back, you can see for that same section, we have one gap where we can't see a conductive thread because it's on the top, and we can see all the rest of them. Sorry? Cool. I am nearly at the end, hopefully. And then I wove some samples representing different numbers. And then to visualize this more, I made an LED strip. So I wove some flexible LED filaments into another Passementerie sample. And then what happens is the Arduino reads the number, and then it changes the color of the LEDs to correspond to that. If it reads a 1, it changes the LED to blue. Otherwise, it's purple. And then this was a little bonus sample to show what else you could do with Passementerie and e-textiles. So this is a touch sensor lighting up another LED sample, and this time it uses, it's an Adafruit Nude, which is a questionable product name, but it's basically the kind of LED filaments you get in bulbs that are LEDs but made to look like those old school Edison bulbs, but they're flexible and you can do lots of fun stuff with them. So yes, I am at the end. We're doing okay. So in summary, we can visualize binary numbers using Passementerie if that's something we feel compelled to do. There's potential to do more with e-textiles and Passementerie. I'm not saying we should just put electronics in everything just for the sake of it, but I think if we can do interdisciplinary stuff, sometimes it can help come up with new ideas. And then in the future, it would be nice to kind of further develop the design tools, particularly open source design tools, because I think that could help maybe keep the craft alive, create some different circuits. And then one of the reviewers had a good example of an application, which is to do steganography, where you've got hidden messages. So you could have binary numbers representing letters and then hide a secret word in your passementerie, for example. So that's me. This is where you can find me. There's some art by my niece of me and her. I like to promote her art. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much for that, Jessica. We're just going to take a couple of questions from the audience, and then if anyone online has a question as well, feel free to drop it in the chat now. We'll try and ask it. So, any questions? One right at the back. Let's see how long this lead is, shall we? Yeah, great.
Right, looking at the photographs you have there, I was reminded of the programming systems for the Apollo missions, where they actually coded.
The echo is like really weird. I know I can't hear you. Yeah, it's.
Yeah, I was reminded of the coding used for the Apollo missions, where the codes were actually put on conductive strips.
It's quite hard to hear on stage. Might if you move closer and ask.
If I move here, does that help?
That's a little better. It's very bizarre.
It's just really boomy though. So if you like stand there.
Maybe I'll move and then I'll come back to answer the question. Yeah.
Or if we do this? Yeah, I was thinking from what you had there of the Apollo missions, where the code for the computers. Should I give the question to the audience first and then?
Just say your question. Yeah.
Okay, that's better. Yeah, I was thinking of the coding for the Apollo missions, where the code's written in grades.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Any similarities there?
I'll go back to the microphone. So the question was about, it was called Little Old Lady Memory, so woven memory for the Apollo missions. I guess it's similar in that it was weaving, but they were kind of weaving wires around magnets, I think. But I guess another example of like interplay between weaving and technology, and I really like that story. Yeah. I don't know if you could weave a Apollo computer with passementerie, but if you want to try. Thank you.
Any more questions in the room? And I'm going to ask you to read it and to speak it into the mic, and then I'm going to repeat it.
Yeah, that's the answer here. It's less of a question, more of a reflection that you might have some thoughts on. I really enjoyed this, specifically because learning to sort of interpret binary numbers fast is something I've been thinking about a lot for the past few months in the run-up to the concert on Sunday, in the context of improvising jazz. For me it was being able to generate interesting patterns and interpret them quickly and understand how that was going to feed back into the medium. So that was what I was thinking about while you were speaking. I don't know if you have any thoughts on it or not.
I mean, it's making me think about how for a long time, the binary watches. A long time I've been like, I really want a binary watch because it'll make me better at reading binary numbers quickly. Because I think you'd love to look at a binary number and know what it means, but it's so hard to kind of be switching between decimal and binary. But I do think if you're making the patterns and understanding them in a different medium, it does help. But I wonder, could you go too far and then not read decimal anymore, and then be rejected by the humans and only have robot friends? So maybe be careful about that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great, and we are running slightly behind again, but if we have one more pressing question, otherwise we will move on. Great, thank you very much, Jessica.
Thank you.